Usually, people wait until the end of the presentation to give you their takeaways. I'm going to give them to you in the beginning because hopefully it will whet your appetite for some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight. The first thing is that every person with ADHD has executive function challenges. There are people without ADHD who also struggle with executive function. And it's because our frontal cortex isn't fully formed until we're about 25 years old. And by then, most people without ADHD have fine-tuned their executive function skills enough so they can navigate through their daily life. If people with people who have ADHD, it often takes a few more years for that frontal cortex to fully mature, and they may still need to work on strengthening specific executive function skills even after the age of 30. I think one of the things that I want to share with you that I think is most important is that as you think about what we're telling you tonight, you want to be very transparent about your goals with your child. And because, and this is whether a person has ADHD or not, children and adults both, if they know the why, they're more willing to engage. And if the why makes sense to them and they understand how it's going to work for them, they're much more likely to jump on board. When children have ADHD, everything takes longer, including learning and development. And none of this has anything to do with intelligence. Now let us expand on these things as we go through the rest of the evening. First of all, just as kind of a review or a starting point, all humans have basic needs. And about a century ago, or a half a century ago, there was a psychologist who developed a hierarchy of needs. And he said, first of all, everybody needs food, clothing, shelter, a sense of safety, and love and belonging. And if they don't have those things, they really have a difficult time navigating through life. Once those needs are met, then esteem develops as a result of having those needs met and feeling safe and loved. And it is then and only then that we can begin to learn. Now, we can learn things in lots of ways, especially if we start out with a difficult childhood. But in order for learning to be maximum, the child needs to feel safe and loved and included, because the ability to learn will be thwarted if those things aren't in place. At ACDS, we believe that the social emotional development of children is as important as the academic development. We really can't have one without the other. So now, having an understanding of what all humans need, we have a framework for talking about how to address what healthy growth looks like. A little bit of basic information about ADHD. It is neurodevelopmental, which means it emerges during the development stage of life, and it can affect the structural and chemical differences that can occur in the brain. The areas of the brain most affected are the areas that control attention, behavior, and activity levels. In the past, it was thought that most children outgrew ADHD by the time they reached adulthood. But ADHD doesn't go away. Today, experts, the research shows that only 1 in 8 children truly outgrow ADHD by adulthood. It is the most heritable condition in the behavioral sciences, and heritable means that you can be prone to that characteristic if it's anywhere in your family gene pool. And if one parent has ADHD, the child has a 1 in 3 chance of having ADHD. If both parents have ADHD, the child has a 2 in 3 chance of having ADHD. These are just averages. And it also helps to explain why neither parent can have ADHD and a child can be born with ADHD. Most people are born with ADHD. There are a few that develop it after birth due to trauma or an injury. It's understood now that about 5% of the total population have ADHD. The number is probably higher than that because there are some people who are doing okay who have ADHD and have never been diagnosed, and but they could be doing better. ADHD can keep a person from finding happiness and success in their lives because there's tends to be a greater tendency towards criticism of children and adults with ADHD because they're lazy, or they don't try hard enough, or they're clueless, or they're stupid. And none of these things are true. Okay. There's 3 types of ADHD now. The naming of ADHD has changed over time. And the way it's identified now is there are 3 types: inattention, predominantly inattention, predominantly hyperactive and impulsivity type, and a combination of both. In order to get a diagnosis of ADHD, several traits have to appear before age 12. The traits, there are 6 or more traits that have been present for at least 6 months in 2 different settings. And also that the traits can't be better explained by a mood or personality disorder. Traits can change over time, which then the presentation can also change over time. These are telltale signs of ADHD. I'm going to address a couple of them before we go on, just so you understand what they refer to. The ones in bold are often the ones that we're most familiar with. Some of the other ones we may not be familiar with. If you're living with a child who has ADHD, you may see some of the unbolded ones more than some of the bolded ones. But metaphorical lightning rod or weathered vein has to do with the lightning rod. Seems to people with ADHD tend to be attract trouble. And so if there's 20 college students who have had who've had weed, and of course I'm going back, I don't think this matters so much anymore, but anyway, who have weed, the one who gets caught is the person with ADHD. They become the scapegoat. They're more often blamed and disciplined than people who don't have ADHD. They're the one that disrupts the family event, the business meeting, the class discussion without meaning to. But they are also the person who can have the ideas and the energies and the premonitions and the images that lead them to be the first one to notice that there's been a shift in mood in a group, or there's a big opportunity that other people don't see yet. Another one that comes up a lot is hyperfocus and trouble with transitions. So how can you, if you're hyper-focused, well, what we see a lot or hear a lot from parents is, my child doesn't seem to have any trouble at home with focus. So I'm surprised to hear that they're having trouble at school. And at the same time, that child may have trouble with, if they're playing a video game at home, they may be so focused on the video game that that they don't hear their parent calling them when it's time for dinner. And then the parent will say things like, it's like they don't even hear me. Another one is this unceasing rumination and excessive worry. And that's that has, and that actually is made worse by the fact that children with ADHD tend to internalize negative feedback more than the general population, and they worry about things more more continuously. We'll talk a little bit about that if we have time. One of my favorites is the sense of time for a person with ADHD. Their sense of time is either now or not now. And not now doesn't mean, I mean, for somebody without ADHD, it doesn't mean like months and years away. But when a person without ADHD thinks about the future, they're going to have a different understanding of that. With a child, particularly a child who has whose sense of time is either this present moment or any other time in the future, that feels endless to them. So if they have something they're supposed to do in 3 days, or that's due in 3 days, well, they have all this time, they have 72 hours. That's a lot of time when you're talking about this present moment. So they really struggle with that. Excuse me. But on the other hand, most of the things I've talked about are things that cause people problems, but people with ADHD also have a high degree of creativity. They have an itch to change things. Okay, hold on here. Let me see how I do this. Yes. Sorry about that. They're generous to a fault. They have unique and active senses of humor. And they have a deep desire to make friends, but they may not always have the tools to know how to do that effectively. And what we call this the condition of paradoxical pairing, because you can have one coin and have the traits on each side of the coin. So for example, it's like you're able to, like I said, you hyper focus at home, and you can't seem to attend for a minute or two, or maybe even 10 minutes at school. There's also the tendency to procrastinate, and at the same time, you also have the ability to get a week's worth of work done in a few hours. And that also affects a person's sense of time, and what they estimate, and also their planning, but what they estimate how long something's going to take, because sometimes they can get it done really fast. Interpersonal and intrapersonal cluelessness, and an uncanny intuition and empathy. Rigid and zealous and passionate at the same time. ADHD is neither all good or all bad. And what we want to work on is to make sure that we work from a position of strength. ADHD is like having a Ferrari brain, a Ferrari engine for a brain with bicycle brakes. Strengthen the brakes and you have a champion. This is a quote from Dr. Edward Hallowell, who's written probably 30 books on ADHD and related um, uh, factors. He wrote a book called How the Happiness in Childhood Affects, no, that's not it exactly, but basically how you grow up as a child affects your ability to be happy as an adult. And that's not the title of the book either, but if you Google that, you would find it. I think what's really important now, because everything that follows from this point on in the presentation, we're going to hone in on some of these some of these points that we want to make here. I think the first thing is that the most important question you want to keep repeating to yourself as a parent until it becomes a mantra and a guide for every word that comes out of your mouth. And that is, what kind of relationship do I want to have with my child when they are 25 and 30 years old? And how do you do that? Well, maybe the most important thing is that you take care with your words and even more care with your tone. Your children are inordinately adept at reading tone. And children with ADHD, because of their intuition, are even more sensitive to tone than other children who have neurotypical brains. The timing is everything. So with small children, you have to scaffold all the tasks. And as they get older, there's less scaffolding required. With children who have ADHD, you have to scaffold things for a much longer period of time. And to the point where you may even have to scaffold discussions. So you don't give them too much at a time because they really can't process it. Listen lots, talk very little, and wait to give them thinking time. And I know that you probably do these following things without thinking very much about it all the time. But it's really important that you be intentional about hugging your children every day, that you tell them you love them every day, that you tell them, I know you are capable every day. Even in the general population of children, we learned as teachers that for every negative comment a child hears, they need to hear 10 positive comments to cancel that out. Because children with ADHD tend to internalize everything. They need much more than that. So they need to hear these things every single day in a very intentional way. Talk to them about how amazing their brain is and how it works. Talk to them about how their brain is a Ferrari brain with bicycle brakes. And when they make mistakes, instead of saying, oh, I can't believe you did that again, none of you would ever do that. But that's just an example. But instead of saying that, you can say, I don't think your bicycle brakes are working very well for you today. We need to strengthen them to make them so that you can make them work, make your brain work better for you. When they're very young, read to them about ADHD. In the ADHD 2.0 book, which is an excellent reference by Dr. Hallowell, there's several books in the resource section that are specifically for children with ADHD that talks about what it is and talk about why strengthening their brakes will help your child be successful. By 9 or 10 years old, they can understand they're not forgetting intentionally, and they're also not doing things most of the time to intentionally annoy you. They just are, especially the children who have impulsivity and hyperactivity, they tend to react before they respond or take the time to think about what it is they're doing. But if you talk about their brains as being Ferrari brains with bicycle brakes, it sort of takes the emotion out of whatever is happening in the moment. But of course, you have to start with a conversation about the Ferrari brain at a time when they're calm and they can hear what you're saying. It doesn't work to bring that up in the moment if you haven't talked about it before. Avoid resorting to past criticism about what a child is not doing that's expected, because that becomes just such a big sort of metaphysical load on them, and they don't let go of those things, and they remember them all. And when it's brought up to them over and over again, it just makes it really much more difficult for them. They can't help their reactions until they're explicitly named and then taught how to manage them. And also, be taught what a better option for them is. They don't get this stuff intuitively. And just as you would teach your child to tie their shoes, unless you want them to be walking through life in Velcro, you can teach your child how to read a room, how to increase their focus, how to use and train their memory. None of these things are quick, but you can build routines and teach them the process and practice until it becomes internalized. So throw all the mistakes on the bicycle brakes, and by saying something like, your brains aren't working so well right now, what can we do to help you until you don't need our help? To remember, to focus, and especially not to sink into a well of, oh, I'm a bad person, I can't remember my homework. Because they do that to themselves, and they may not show it, especially as children get older and learn to mask some of those things a little bit more easily. It may not be as easy to see, and consequences don't work. It only makes the issue worse. Taking away a child's recess, taking away their opportunity to participate in sports, which is the one thing that they feel good about, makes living with ADHD much worse. And what we want to do in helping our children embrace, whether it's ADHD or they're just having executive function challenges, we want to make them feel good about their brains. We want to make them feel good about themselves and how they can make whatever is a struggle or challenge for them, how to work through that in a way that is going to make them successful. They need movement to re-engage their brain when they're tired, and to do harder stuff. And so we want them to move, we want them to play, we want them to have brain breaks, whether they're just for a few seconds or for 10 minutes or whatever. And we'll talk more about that as we get into this a little bit. When you're both calm, you make a plan and then you practice the plan. You teach them how to visualize what they're going to do, and then they practice it, and then you ask them as often as necessary, what's helpful to make this work for you? Okay, so I talked about working from a position of strength, and just as we can build muscle when we exercise, which then allows us to be stronger, so we can still pick up our suitcases or we can, compete in heavy weightlifting if we want to. In education, we work really hard to identify strengths and instead of weaknesses. And then we use those strengths to help our students strengthen their weaknesses and learn who they are. And with parenting, it's the same things. We want to talk about our children's strengths with them. We want to help them see what those strengths are. There's no trick to this. There's 3 things that you want to have in place that will help your child move from a space of overwhelm to a space where they understand what they can do and how they can build their strengths and how they can use their gifts to their advantage. The first one is awareness. Children and adults learn how to manage their traits. In fact, we talk about these in terms of traits rather than symptoms, because everybody has character traits, and it's how we use those traits that identifies us as a happy person, or a person who can function well in critical situations, or an angry person, or whatever. And as I said before, the language is so important. And so we're going to use positive language and talk about these traits and help our children understand how these traits can become an asset more than a liability for them. And then learning strategies to move in a positive direction. And that takes reinforcement and repetition and repetition and repetition and repetition until it becomes, they've internalized it and they can do it without thinking. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but one of the things about that repetition to the point where it's internalized is that they now have these skills where they do them and they don't have to think the process through every single time. And that gives them then more time for other things that they enjoy. And finally, helping your child articulate their power to themselves, to you, and also to be able to say what it is they need to make progress. And we want to teach our children how to advocate for themselves, because we're not always going to be around, and we want to make sure that they're able to say what it is they need when we're not around. I want to say a word about motivation, and then Julie's going to pick up the conversation here in just a minute. We can't motivate anyone else to do anything. True motivation comes from within, and we can persuade, we can threaten, we can cajole, we can bribe, but these are really only temporary solutions, and they don't work in the long run, and they don't help a child or an adult to develop that inner motivation to do what's necessary or important to them to become the best person they can be. So Julie's going to now talk about some specifics and how different things affect some of the executive function skills that your child are trying to learn. And even though their executive function isn't fully mature till they're 25, children can learn some strategies to make it so that they can manage some of the things that they have to do long before they're age 25. So with that, when we get to routines, I might jump in again, but I'm going to let Julie take over for now.
All right. Do you want to keep clicking the slides there so that they move along?
Sure.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. I am Julie Brown. I am a second grade teacher at our amazing school. I am also the learning support coach. And I am a fellow diagnosed ADHDer, so I have kind of a unique perspective on ADHD, and I brought that into the classroom. And so I just want to talk about an environment. We're going to kind of go into detail about different things in the environment. We know that environment is it's made up of so many different things. But you, as the parents, as the grown-ups in the house, you have a say and control over the things that are in your child's environment, such as their diet, their exposure to different toxins, the amount of stress that they are introduced to. You're not always in charge of life circumstances. Those kind of happen upon us, but how you handle them and how you present with your um, little humans in the house makes a difference. And then the study space at home, you are in charge of that. You get to guide that and direct that, and be the leader in that situation. Everything is not a discussion. There are times that you have to lead and they have to learn in that process of what's happening. Other times it's a discussion. They should have valuable input and feedback into their environment. And parts of the environment will be very important for your child to have some feedback on. Building, you can go to the next one. We're going to talk about how to build a working environment. And I think the most important thing that I can say as both a person with ADHD, a teacher who has taught several hundreds of children over the years, and a mom of a child who has ADHD, being flexible is by far the most important part of your environment and of your life with these humans. Flexibility is critical. Being proactive, thinking ahead for your child who maybe isn't able to quite think ahead yet for themselves. There were a lot of questions surrounding homework and setup space and how do we get them to do their stuff in a timely manner. And I'm going to get to that in one sec. I want to kind of go through a few more of these things. Having clear rules or expected behaviors is really important. Mary Beth talked about like transparency and communication. I cannot stress this more. Having a conversation with your child and making sure they are very clear on what's expected means less words when you're setting that up. So this is what's expected of you. When it comes to cleaning your room, we have 3 things. When it comes to homework, there are 3 things. And if they understand the expectation and it is repeated over and over and over again, eventually that becomes set for them. Setting firm and consistent boundaries that support that expected behavior without shaming them. So, there are no tricks, like Mary Beth said, and there are definitely consequences are not the way that we like to go about this. When you think about consequences, I like to put it in a little frame of logical outcomes. When you do this, this is what logically happens. So when you throw your things on the floor, there is a mess and someone can get hurt. So therefore, I cannot let you come to the next part of our day until this is cleaned up. It's not safe. So that in and of itself is, yes, a consequence because they're having to do the expected behavior before moving on to the next thing. And yet it's a logical consequence. And so when a logical consequence, really try to, or a logical outcome, I'm going to kind of change that verbiage a bit. The logical outcome is you want these humans to be able to participate in a social world. And so you want them to be thinking beyond the moment and beyond themselves. And so when they have a behavior that is unexpected, tying it back to what was expected and helping them see the correlation is really important. Focus on their strengths. always do your best to use positive language. You're going to fail sometimes, and you're not going to always use positive language, and just use that as a learning part for you. And don't beat yourself up over that. You just keep trying, because it will not be the last time you have conversations with them. This will be an ongoing thing forever and always. Using visual and verbal cues. So if it's about homework, have a step system. Have it listed. Step 1, step 2, step 3. Put a visual chart somewhere. Use a verbal cue. This is something I did with my son. He would interrupt often. I would be talking and he would just come up and interrupt. And I would say, notice that I am speaking to someone. And later I would ask him, do you think you're more important than this person? And he would clearly say, no, I don't. Okay, so notice when I'm speaking, and if you need my attention, then I want you to place your hand on my shoulder or on my knee. And that will tell me that you need my attention. So for your children, you can find another cue to help them interrupt you without interrupting in a big way. The other thing that's really important is often, well, children in general, but often children with ADHD will argue every part of every conversation if it is not exactly what they were hoping it would be. And so I use just a very firm, this is not a discussion, this is a direction. And so I will say it once. They will probably likely try to argue. I will say it one more time, and often I will hold up a hand. Not a discussion. Follow the direction first. Then we can have a discussion about it once I see that you heard what the expectation is. And that can help alleviate big arguments. It can also help shift their thinking into a place of, okay, I was asked to do something. I need to calm myself down. They might be emotionally dysregulated in that moment. It shifts the thinking almost immediately. Having visual schedules and timers with verbal reminders are going to be lifesavers for homework specifically. In my life alone, my iPhone is filled with timers all day long. I have a timer that goes off for everything. And so some of the questions were, what about kids who kind of get stuck on they're just staring and a half hour goes by and they've done nothing? Well, set up a timer, a 5-minute check-in, and talk to them. Open the dialogue up about what do you need to accomplish right now? Let's take the very first part. We're going to set 5-minute timer. So then if they get hyperfixed on something else, or they're just spaced out during that moment, when that 5-minute timer goes off and they see that they haven't done what's expected, you can go back and re-engage in that conversation and start again. I do think that for children with ADHD, token systems work. Children with ADHD, people with ADHD need immediate feedback. So when they get an immediate feedback to something that they're doing in the form of praise, in the form of some sort of a carrot that leads them along, that helps to solidify the behaviors that you're wanting to see. Now, that can be scaffolded and stretched and pulled after time. Like Mary Beth said earlier, it's a matter of doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it until it sticks. And there's no one way that works for every child. Some kids are going to grab onto one area and immediately they make a change. Other kids, it's going to take 157 times. And on that 158th time, it's going to click. And you're going to think you've gone mad, but it happens. Also, finding a place for your child to feel safe and calm when they're having and experiencing those big emotional dysregulated moments. So in your environment, in their environment, setting up a calm down area, and setting up guidelines for that. I can see that you are feeling very upset right now, and I'm going to give you a few minutes because this is not a productive conversation. So go take a few minutes in your calm area. Maybe it's their bedroom. Maybe it's a walk outside in the backyard. Go take a few minutes. Go sit with the dog, sit with the cat, When you feel ready, please come back so we can talk about this. If too much time goes by, I'm going to come and get you. But please go try to calm down and then we can have this conversation. And that's a really good way when they have a space that they know they're not going to, it's not going to be interrupted. They're not going to feel nagged. That was some of the verbiage that we saw in these questions. I feel like I'm nagging my kid, and then they get real upset. So this might help if they have an area where they can go to be calm and feel safe and regulate. All right. Screen time. Next slide. All right. So we have a lot of things about screen time, and Mary Beth may want to chime in here on screen time as well. Basically, my position on screen time is that less is better. As we get older, more is okay. Obviously, we live in a world and a time where screens are kind of it. But if you are 5 and under, screen time should not be a conversation. They should be doing play, unstructured play. They should be reading. Understandably, once we kind of enter the school zone, 5 and older, you have that early ed age. And I think that, sometimes screen time is necessary. I get it. Sometimes we need a break and they go on a screen. My personal preference is that during school time, if it's not academic related, screen time for fun and games should be reserved for the weekends. But again, each age level can handle more than the next age level, right? Things that probably go without saying is screen time should always be monitored. It should never be looked away from. You should always have fail safes, safety precautions in place with your children. But if they're on screens, they're not being active, their brains are engaged in a different way, and you're feeding the immediate gratification that their brains get instead of stretching them and helping them to move in ways that their bodies need to move to help regulate. So it's almost like a soothing activity instead of equipping them with tools like movement and creative thinking. So really think about it when you're handing out screen time. Mary Beth, did you want to add anything to screen time?
No, because what you said that's really critical to understand is that children can become addicted to screens. And in Korea, they actually have in-house withdrawal treatment because there's so many children who spend so much time on screens that they actually go through withdrawal when they remove themselves from the screens. So that's the extreme. On the one hand, on the other hand, children with ADHD and some certain kinds of attention, executive function challenges such as attention and focus, need as many opportunities to use all different parts of their brains as possible, and their bodies, because as we'll talk about in just a few minutes, movement is critical for all children, but especially children with ADHD.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to move on to executive function. I'm going to pick the pace up a little bit for sake of time. I want to make sure we get through everything. And then if we have to go back, we can go back a little bit if there is time. And again, as Mary Beth said in the beginning, we are happy to answer questions that we may not have had time to cover during this presentation later if you reach out to us. All right, executive function. All humans with ADHD have executive function challenges. And truthfully, many humans without diagnosable ADHD have executive functioning challenges. Some children and adults without ADHD experience those same challenges. Executive function is the kind of the ability to do what some people think are just very basic tasks, like attending and focusing on something that somebody's saying or doing. It has to do with working memory, There is organizational pieces. Can I put my backpack? Can I walk into the classroom, put my backpack in the cubby? When I come home, do I do the steps that I'm supposed to do? So I walk in the door, I hang my backpack up, I take my shoes off, I go wash my hands, I get a snack. Like, am I able to kind of do those organizational things on a regular basis? I'm sure I can't see your faces, but I'm sure many of you are like, nope, they're not doing that. So working on those executive functioning pieces are critical. And oftentimes we want to, as parents, go from 1 to 1,000. Like, why can't they do that? They're 8 years old or they're 12 years old. And really what we need to do is take a breath and say, okay, what is the most important thing that I want them to achieve right now? When they get home, I want them to hang their backpack up or not just throw it on the floor. That's what I want them to do. And so that's the task that you attack. You pick the most important thing and you go after that one with all your might and help them to get there as well. But understand why that's the one you want also. Like, kind of look at the organizational things that your child does and figure out which one is going to impact them the most, and not just the one that annoys you the most, if that makes sense. um, Setting goals for those tasks. So, making sure that they know this is what's expected. And again, with this comes sometimes the carrot, the little piece of, ooh, if you can do this, it's going to save us easily 15 minutes a week, which means you're going to get 15 minutes of extra game time with us on Friday night because we will have saved so much time. And then, of course, there is the metacognition piece, which is the emotional regulation. And executive functioning struggles are, some of that is that those big emotions that you see and over something super small, in your opinion, and it just feels very big and I'm overwhelmed with it all. And so how do we handle that? You have got to be clear in your communication, as we've stated earlier. Be clear, clear, clear. State what is expected and expect that your child can do it. Expect them to succeed. Expect and let them know that you believe in them and you know they can do it. If you give the message that they're working on it and okay, we're going to try. No, that has this tenor or a tone to it of, you're not quite doing it yet, versus, okay, I know you can do this. I believe in it. What are we going to do and how are we going to get there? And I think that the way you communicate to your child speaks volumes. And having a tone, Mary Beth talked about tone earlier. I believe that your affect and your tone really help children to receive and understand what is expected. When they have disappointed you, if you don't let them know they've disappointed you, they're not going to know. It's not clear. They can't read your mind, and often they can't read your body language unless it is very big and obvious. So, oh man, that's a bummer. All right, let's talk about how we can fix this in the future. What can we do next time? Right? So you've given like a facial expression, you've changed your voice to be a sadder tone, and now let's fix it. And then when we fix it, that all changes to like, yeah, we're going to do this. I'm so excited. That was a great plan. And then they hear that excitement. So tone matters. Assign responsibility to them. They need to know that there are things they're responsible for and they need to be held accountable for those things. Again, not 150 things. Start with the most important things. Give them challenges that they can do and they can be successful at. And as they begin to grow, you can grow those challenges. All right, we're getting quick on time here. Trouble with organization, time, physical, and thought. We talked a little bit about how do we help our child keep their materials organized. This was one of the big instructions, and I'm just going to go back to that step by step. Expectations. Sit down with your child and ask them how they would like their area make the most sense to them, and then help them execute that. And then as they start to see that maybe that's not the most efficient way, start to make some adjustments to that environment. But don't be afraid to lead in that setting and say, I'm not so sure that this is the right place for your writing supplies. What do you think about trying them over here next time if they're in a weird space? So having some flexibility there and opening that dialogue with them is going to be really important. But planning, talking, and helping them order and helping them have a voice in the order of their space. And as far as procrastination, timer, 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 break it down, set up the timer, give them a visual timer, microwave timer, iPhone timer, whatever that needs to look like. All right. Language, we've talked a lot about the language, so I'm not going to say too much more about language other than I'm just going to kind of be a broken record and say you need to be clear, you need to be intentional, you need to be kind and encouraging and sometimes firm. Firm is loving, and it shows that things are important. Some things more important than others. And so being very purposeful in what you say and how you say it models to them. And also they're able to receive that and say, okay, and they're going to keep working on it. They don't have it yet. They're not sure how to do these things yet, but they're working on it. And the more you model and the more you work with them, the more you'll see those connections being made for them. All right. Trouble with attention, lack of focus. How do I keep my child from zoning out in class? How do I help my child to focus when they're doing their homework? My child doesn't seem to have stamina. Stamina is a muscle. I know it's not in the medical books, but it is. It's a muscle and it has to be built and it has to be practiced and it has to be worked on. And so setting goals. Right now, we're going to work for 5 minutes solidly. I'm going to set the timer for 5 minutes. I'm going to sit with you and you're going to get these 5 minutes done. And then it's a big celebration. And you have to know as a parent when to give and take, and you need to have dialogues with your child's teachers about how to support and what works well for them. Have them help you understand what is most important, what is middle important, and what maybe can wait. And that might help guide the way that you work on these things at home for stamina as well. You want to put the most important things for homework at the top of the list. This is the most important. It is due at this time. You also have to know how to read between the manipulation and the real inability to get something done, because kids are master manipulators, but also kids with ADHD struggle with time management, as you've heard us say. And so you have to be able to figure out, ooh, are they working the system right now? Or are they really struggling with this right now? You know your child better than anybody, and you know their signs and their tells when they're trying to work the system. So make sure, to kind of get into that with them. The timer factor works for hyperfocus too. It can snap you out of a hyperfocus really well. Transitions, if you're having trouble with transitions, again, this is all about front loading, making sure your child knows what to expect. We are going to be going to the amusement park. When we get there, this is what we're doing. We're having snack at this time. First this, then this, then this. Tell me what I said. All right, great. First this, then this, then this. Very clear. It helps with the transition. The other part is to really remind your child that they are wired in such an amazing way and their brain works in such an amazing way. And these reminders and these things are to help them feel confident entering into a situation maybe that they're not so confident entering into, and that changes are not necessarily a bad thing, that we have to learn to be flexible. And this is one of those ways that we're going to build that muscle, another muscle that's probably not in the books. Again, I kind of mentioned rewards about expected behavior, and encouraging all along the way. You're their greatest cheerleader. All right, emotional regulation. We have trouble with emotional regulation in the moment. You have to match their energy, or you have to go opposite of their energy. They're hugely dysregulated. You need to approach calm and quietly. Say less, grown-ups. I can see that you are having a hard time, or I notice that this is hurting your feelings, or I see that you're upset about X, Y, or Z. Their response is going to be all kinds of ways. They may not say anything. They may say something nasty. It may just be, yeah. You don't know what they're going to say, but there's two ways in which you can respond. You can respond by saying, I see this is hard for you. Let's talk about why. And is it because this is a difficult situation for you? Or is it because you want to do something else? Those are really the only two reasons why I would be getting upset over homework. I want to go do video games, or I just don't understand this math problem and I don't know how to articulate that. And that will guide the next steps, because then you've given them the chance to express how they feel. You've given them the opportunity to feel safe and heard and ask for help. And then you can work alongside them. And it does not hurt to then communicate with their teacher, like, we had a rough night last night, and here's why. I can't tell you how much more I wish parents would communicate that when they're having struggles over homework. The last thing I ever want to hear is a parent working with a child for hours on end to try to get a homework assignment done, and it's just this battle. No, thank you. Please don't do that. As if your child in my class, please don't do that. Reach out. And I know many, if not all teachers will say the same. Please reach out and let us know. We want to support you in this journey. Okay, Mary Beth, we're already 2 minutes over time, but I'm gonna yield.
Okay, so let me, can I talk now? Oh, yes, you can hear me. Okay, so this is actually going to be the last slide of the evening, because it addresses a lot of the other questions that people had about treatment and medication. Exercise is the most powerful and effective non-medical tool we have. Use it for yourself, use it for your child. It will help them get out of their back reptilian brain back into their frontal cortex, where they're logical and they can think and respond. If your child is struggling with an executive function challenge and you don't know how to help them, find somebody who can help you. There are executive function coaches. You can talk to a licensed social worker. A lot of times they can give you strategies for helping your child build a skill that they're having trouble with. And finally, if you suspect that you or your child has ADHD, talk to somebody, because your life can be, a lot of the struggles that both you or your child have regarding ADHD, you can learn things that will help make your life easier and more manageable. Okay, hold on here. We're gonna skip all this because we've already addressed it. The links to these books that were written by Dr. Hallowell are on sale through Amazon or any other place where you would buy books. And I recommend both of them. The second one, ADHD Explained, is the most recently published, and he's written that specifically for an ADHD audience. There are these resources are in the chat, and they and so you can, I highly recommend them. The Untapped Learning is for middle school and high school students. Understood.org gives you all kinds of information about ADHD, executive functions, and stress and anxiety. Finally, ADDitude Magazine is an exceptional resource, and you can either get an online prescription or you can get a print prescription. And then finally, this is Julie and my, if you have questions that didn't get answered tonight, please fill out the survey. That's another way that you can let us know what your questions are. Thank you very much. We
Thank
hope
you.
that we've given you some information that you find helpful, and reach out to us if you need more information or a recommendation for a resource, because we have other resources that we can recommend. And
Thank you so much.
that's
Good
it.
night. Thank you
Good
for your
night.
time tonight.